Welcome, Paul. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation for so many reasons. First, this is the very first session on Wealthy Wednesdays for the year 2021, and we have never had a pilot on this show. So I'm really excited about our conversation. So, why don't we start by understanding a little bit about you, Paul? Tell us, what is your story?
Sure. I'll take you back to the very, very beginning, really. So that tends to be where it starts with a lot of vocational jobs, I think. I grew up in Leeds in a single parent household, um, in a quite an underprivileged area of Leeds, I think is probably the best way to say it. But one of the things that we used to do quite often, I used to do with my grandparents, was to go to the local airports, go to Leeds and Bradford Airport and watch the aeroplanes land. And it was just from a very, very early age, it was something that just really captured my imagination. As a child, I was the kind of person who always wanted to know how something worked. So rather than just being excited at the look of an aeroplane, I wanted to know, how this massive chunk of metal is able to stay up in the sky. And I think a lot of people probably still have that in their heads. The actual mechanics of what it was doing and how you made it work and how you could do these things was something that I just absolutely loved. Going through high school, being a pilot was the thing I wanted to do. But unfortunately, I was good at school, but I wasn't massively academic. I had to work incredibly hard to get to where I got to. So all the way through school, I was told not to pursue the career as being a pilot, that I wasn't good enough. My maths and physics in particular, they said wasn't good enough because I wasn't a straight A student. So I was massively put off of it. I decided not to pursue a career in the aviation industry. So I moved to London to study electrics, working in the entertainment industry, predominantly theatre. And I loved it. I absolutely loved that job. But for me, there was always something missing. There was just this piece of me that was missing. Um, Throughout my life, my mum had always told me that for her, the crucial thing was always having a house. Like having your own house was like the big thing that she instilled in me and my sister. So that was like my focus when I moved to London, was getting a house. I want to have a house, I want to have a roof over my head, I want to own this property. And obviously in London, it's much better to own sometimes than than it is to rent, just because of the pure amount of money. So that was my goal really when I was in London: earn money, be able to have this house, and then be able to start a family. And it was when I was 27, the entertainment industry took a bit of a knock around the time of the financial crisis. There wasn't really a lot of money going into the arts. And I just stumbled across this article online. If you believe in manifesting and believe in the universe, there's probably something in this. That I saw this article say one of the big airlines in the UK were recruiting, and they were basically offering to take you from no experience all the way through your training, like a scholarship, and provide you with a job at the end. But part of the interview process was to fly a commercial simulator, to get in a jet and really kind of get your hands on it. So I thought, what have I got to lose? There's kind of nothing really to lose here. So I went and I applied. I went to Oxford and I was there for 2 days doing this really intense selection process. The day afterwards, I was working at the Royal Opera House. I was working on a brand new ballet. And if you would have said to me about 10 years before, when I was pursuing my theatre career, what would be the highlight? Doing a big ballet with the Royal Ballet at the Royal Opera House would be the thing. But I sat in the auditorium after my interview just thinking, this isn't right. Like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I've had this taste now of something else. This is not what I should be doing. So I got a call from the flight school to tell me I wasn't successful. And it was really soul destroying, as I'm sure you can imagine. And I sat there again watching this ballet thinking, this should be the dream. Like, this should be the thing I want to do, what's in front of me. But somehow it just isn't. So it was a really kind of weird moment for me, trying to think what the next steps were. And I was really lucky. About 2 hours later, I had another call from the flight school to tell me that they'd actually been inundated with applicants for the EasyJet program, which was the airline that were recruiting, and they'd actually taken less pilots than they wanted to take. So I had actually passed the selection, but I just hadn't made it through. So they said if I was willing to self-fund the course, if I was willing to provide the funding myself, they would take me on. So I had this really kind of bizarre moment with my wife of, we've just bought this house, this one thing that I said I really want to do, and now I want to sell it because I want to go off and be a pilot. So yeah, fast forward a couple of months, we remortgaged our house, secured the funding, and I'm sat in flight school in Oxford, going through a really intense kind of 2-year process to train to be a pilot. So yeah, came out the other side of that 2 years with a completely different mindset around a lot of things. Starting to believe in myself, to realize that actually I can do it. I'd been told I couldn't, and I'd lived with this for about 10 years thinking it's not possible, and now all of a sudden I'm here and I'm doing it. So I managed to get my first job, and it was going to be based in Munich. So I moved out to Munich with my wife, my daughter, and at the time my 6-week-old son, which is pretty crazy, stepping off a plane in Munich in January when it's 6 foot of snow on the ground, and just thinking, this is a new world. So yeah, I was in Munich for about 6 months. We really wanted to get back to the UK, applied for a base in the UK, moved to Bristol, and went back to the focus of I want a house. I want a house. I want to save my money. I want to get a house. So we just about saved up enough money for a deposit, put a deposit down on a house. And this may sound like it's stretching the truth, but this is exactly how it happened. So we bought a new build. We were in the office. We signed the contract. I walked out of the office, and I got a phone call from the chief pilot of the airline I was flying for, to tell me the airline had just collapsed. So I just committed to this house. We'd just moved back, and the airline I was working for collapsed. So it was pretty horrible. Spending 10 years to kind of realize the dream, and then having it kind of the rug pulled from underneath you was pretty nasty. But I like to say I'm quite a resilient person. So I hit the job market really hard, and within 24 hours, I was re-employed back in the sky, which was amazing. So I managed to get a job not too far from where I lived, but it involved a lot of commuting. The work-life balance wasn't particularly good, but I was flying. It was the dream job. I was able to continue doing it. 11 months later, which is March 2020 last year, the airline entered administration. So the rug was pulled from under me once again. So 2 redundancies within a year. And again, it's horrible. And, a lot of people have gone through this during COVID. But the big thing this time, and the big difference, was that the recruitment just wasn't happening. You can see what's happening with the travel industry right now, and the aviation industry in particular. There's mass redundancies everywhere. So it just wasn't looking like there was going to be any job in the aviation industry again. So I decided to do something different. I wanted to give back, I wanted to help, and I wanted to use my skills. That was kind of my big thing. So I set up my business called the Cockpit Method, with the intention of taking everything I'd learned from the cockpit, all of the methods that I'd been taught, and help other people with them. I kind of had a bit of imposter syndrome at first, thinking, I'm just a pilot. How can I go and help people? How can I do this? But my story got picked up by the BBC for CEO Secrets, which was amazing. And about 2 days later, I got contacted by the NHS, who wanted me to go and deliver training for frontline workers. The whole emphasis being that, when you're in the commercial cockpit, if you are in a stressful situation, you can't remove yourself. If you're halfway over the Atlantic and you have an emergency, you have to deal with it. You have to change your mindset. You have to just get on with it, unfortunately. And it's the same for NHS frontline workers right now, that they're really suffering. They don't have time for themselves. They don't have time for self-care, just like a pilot would in that situation. But obviously for them, it's long term. At least for me, my day ends and I can go home and not think about it. So that's kind of where the business started, really. And it's just progressed from there. So now I'm working with business owners. I've created a 12-week program to try and coach business owners using all of the methods from the cockpit. But my goal for 2021 is to help 1 million people. So it's a big goal, but I believe in setting goals that are almost unachievable. because I think that's the only time we push ourselves. That's when we push ourselves out of our comfort zone. So for me, doing something like this is where I'm going to help people. So yeah, that's my slightly long-winded story.
Oh, wow. What a beautiful story. What a fascinating story. Entertainment industry, theater, Royal Ballet, and flying across the skies,
Yeah.
and then coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it could get more varied if I, if when I was 7, if I would have said to myself, what 3 jobs can I choose? They're going to be completely different. I still don't think I would have chosen these 3.
Yeah. We are going to talk a little in shortly. We are going to talk about the cockpit method, but I want to share with you that we have an audience building up. So we have Jill Brown, who's joining us from Wales, and Jill actually is into flying, and I think that's the connection she has with this particular session. And we have Derek, who's joining us from the US. So hi,
Oh,
Jill. Hi, Derek. And Jill agrees with you and she says, flying always goes boom to bust. Repeat.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It does indeed. So, Paul, talk to us a little bit about the cockpit method. How did you take the learning, all the learning that you had as a commercial pilot, and bring it into the coaching? Tell us more.
Yeah, so it started in 2 ways actually. The kind of initial idea behind the cockpit method was I was talking to a couple of friends of mine who work in the city in London, and they were telling me about a couple of things that had happened to them in their business as a result of COVID. And we were just saying that these things would have never happened in the aviation industry. Well, maybe in the aviation industry, but never in the cockpit. Um, and it's a really interesting thing for pilots, especially for pilots starting business, because you inherently think of pilots as being good decision makers, but also risk takers. And actually, we do take risk every day, but everything we do is a calculated risk. So we have a set of really strict procedures and really strict guidelines that we follow to do absolutely everything. And these things have got me out of life and death scenarios before. I can think of 2 times in my career where if I would have made the wrong decision, it potentially would have been catastrophic. And I just started thinking, what if the world had this? If the world used these methods that we use, absolutely it wouldn't work for everybody and it wouldn't work for every scenario. But I just started to think, could we have avoided some of the situations we're in? And obviously a global pandemic, you can't control that side of it, the kind of unknown. But I was kind of comparing COVID to a commercial flight and thinking, if I'm sat on the end of the runway and I'm about to go flying, I know everything that's in front of me. And where I don't know what's in front of me, I have something to help me through that situation. So whether it be a decision-making process or a checklist or some kind of guideline. So I wanted to kind of bring that to business owners in particularly, just to say, we have the fight or flight response, and it's something I talk about quite a lot, where something happens and we immediately want to respond. And in business, I think, especially with things like social media, we're particularly bad with responding to comments. If somebody says something to you, we're straight on there and we want to reply to them rather than just taking a moment to think about what's going on. And you can imagine in a cockpit, if I did that, if I started responding really quickly to things, potentially the outcome is going to be catastrophic. So how do we kind of take those steps to think about what is the right thing to do in every situation? And ultimately, it just comes down to thinking it through. So in the cockpit, we have a 6-step process for decision making. And that's what I started to use to coach people. So when I have a one-to-one coaching session, I will just work through these 6 steps with them and just say, properly diagnosing the situation. So why are you in this position? What has happened? What are the events that have led to that? What are your options? Let's look at everything that's on the table, even the things that we want to dismiss immediately. Let's put everything on the table, properly diagnose it, properly assess, and then take it from there. And then the other side of it was the well-being and the mindset thing, which I never intended to be a thing until the NHS contacted me. It was never, I say to everybody, I'm not a well-being expert. I'm an airline pilot that's dealt with stress, in one of the most high-pressured offices in the world. But I was on a meeting once, and somebody was talking to me about self-care and the idea that self-care is actually inherently a selfish act. To put yourself first, to us, feels selfish and nobody really wants to do it. And I said, well, it's just like the oxygen mask. When you're on an aeroplane and the cabin crew tell you to fit your own oxygen mask before helping somebody else, it's exactly the same as that. And when I got into detail, kind of teaching people about, the biology of the body, and that, if your brain is starved of oxygen, you're going to pass out, you're going to lose consciousness. It's not going to be fatal, but you'll lose consciousness. So you have to fit your oxygen mask. You have to fit your oxygen mask in order to be able to continue, to be able to work. And that's what it's like in the cockpit for us with the oxygen mask. So the only time we don't use a checklist is when you fit your oxygen mask, because you have to. You have 30 seconds to put an oxygen mask on before you're going to pass out. So as a pilot, I would fit my oxygen mask, then I would check on the other pilot, then I'd check on the cabin crew, and then I would check on the passengers. And the whole idea behind it is that as long as I've got my oxygen mask on, I can help everybody. I am invaluable to the rest of that aircraft. But if I don't fit my oxygen mask, I'm useless. I'm absolutely useless, and I can't help anybody. And that's where the self-care philosophy came in.
This is one of my favorite analogies about self-care and really filling ourselves up, because like you said, if the pilot were not to put their oxygen mask, they would be dead shortly, and everyone else would be dead too. They would be no good to anyone, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And as kind of grim as it sounds, it is that true. And you can tell people every day to take steps for self-care, but there's something about that analogy, I think, that just clicks with people when you think, oh yeah, I've been on an aeroplane and that could have happened when I was on that aeroplane. But I'm really glad that that person took the steps to be able to keep me safe. Yeah, I think it massively resonates.
Yes. So how did you decide on the focus around well-being mindset, because you never really saw yourself as a well-being person, I mean, as a well-being expert?
Yeah, so it started, I think, like a lot of people, during lockdown, I felt useless. I'd just lost my job. I was used to being out all the time. And all of a sudden, I just find myself sat at home doing the homeschooling, but I just felt like I wasn't really doing anything. So I started to volunteer for the NHS and doing some work in my local community. So for the local pharmacy and the local doctor's surgery. And I could see how much, I mean, even in April last year, how much they were struggling and how much they were suffering. And it was when I went into the pharmacist, and I said to the pharmacist, how are you? And he said, yeah, I'm good. I said, no, but how are you? And he kind of stopped and said, do you know, no one's ever asked me that. No one's ever asked me how I am. And we just got talking about how he was feeling, and how the pandemic was affecting him, and how he just wanted to be listened to, but also kind of, he felt like he needed something to kind of grab onto. It just felt like, he compared it to a hamster wheel that is going and going and going and going, and there's no way of stopping it. And I mentioned, what I call the oxygen mask mentality. And you could just see the spark, that moment of, actually, yeah, you're right. And I just said to him at the time, just takes 7 minutes. Like that's my number, 7 minutes. Obviously there's a lot in the number 7, so it's quite a powerful number to use in a lot of ways. But just 7 minutes, take 7 minutes to just stop and just take stock of what you're doing. We have a saying in the aviation industry that you are never in a situation that you can't make worse. And I think that's so true of everything. We can make everything worse by rushing, but you always think it needs to be dealt with right now. And I came back to that pharmacist about a week later and said, how are you? He said, I've scheduled 7 minutes every day, and it's just changed everything. Like he said, I just feel so much better. I feel so much in control. So that was kind of the start of it, really.
Amazing. Only 7 minutes, and what a massive difference they make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say for me, it's 7 minutes of being mindful as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we're quite bad at doing multiple things at a time, but for me, I will always take 7 minutes every morning to read. And I will make sure that it's just me. I'm away from my children. I don't have the radio on. I have nothing. For 7 minutes, I just am present with that one thing that I'm doing. And I think for me, that's the key to 7 minutes being the most valuable time in your day.
Yeah, I think there's too much focus on seeing multitasking as a skill, but we can't really be in two places in the exact same moment. It doesn't work that way.
No, exactly. And again, it's something that comes back from the aviation industry, that we run, as I said, everything that we do is from a checklist. So if you're going to flick a switch or press a button, it has to be on the checklist. And in the aviation industry, you can only ever have one checklist out at a time. You cannot be working through two checklists. So if I'm working, for example, on a particular type of an emergency, and I've got the emergency checklist in front of me, it might be that halfway through that checklist, I need to do something different. I need to switch to another checklist. And it will actually say in the checklist, move to page whatever. And you physically cannot have both of them at the same time. It makes you stop. You don't divide your attention. You completely switch to a new task. And I think that's so important. I was talking to somebody this morning about people feeling kind of really down at the moment with what's going on in the world. And I said to them, they didn't want to not listen to the news. They felt detached if they didn't listen to the news. And I just said to them, just consume your news mindfully. So you make a conscious decision that I am going to go on this website, or I'm going to watch this news channel, and I'm going to do it for this amount of time, and I'm going to engage in it. I'm going to really take on board what's been said. Because I think the minute we have the radio on in the background and we just pick up snippets of what's going on, or we use social media for news, you hear the sound bites that the newspapers want you to hear, that ultimately terrifies everybody, and you don't dive into that knowledge. You're not present in the moment. You're just taking on the little bits.
So mindfulness is a huge part of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, mindfulness is the key to well-being. As I said, I don't claim to be a well-being expert, but I take everything I've learned and try and package it together. So the two things that I say are the most important is making a mindful decision to do something. So I will never tell anybody what that thing is to do, because it's subjective and it's different for everybody. But making a conscious decision to say, I am going to meditate now. I'm going to meditate for the next 20 minutes. That is my conscious decision. Or I'm going to go out and get exercise. That's my conscious decision to be in nature. And then the other side of it for me is knowledge. It's knowing the absolute basics of what your body needs, why it needs it, and therefore what you can do to support it. If you're the kind of person who suffers with a bad back and you constantly go to have massages to try and relieve tension and all this kind of stuff, unless you, with your kind of decision-making process, look at the root cause of what's causing it, your bad chair, your bad posture, you don't stand properly, you've got wrong shoes, you will never fix that problem. You can throw money at it your entire life to have temporary fixes, but until you know what's causing that problem, you're never going to fix it. There's an analogy I use from the cockpit, actually, and it happened to me. Firstly, apologies if anyone's scared of flying, if I'm about to make it worse for you. I did one of my very first simulator sessions. I was a brand new pilot, just out of flight school, and you get like 6 months of trainings. The instructor that we were working with gave us an engine failure. So the left engine of the aeroplane just stopped in flight. So being all keen and eager, we got out the checklist, we did our decision-making process, the left engine stopped, we need to fix the left engine. So we ran through the checklist for the left engine and dealt with it, continued flying and looked at diverting. And about 20 minutes later, the right engine stopped. So we now have no engines on this aeroplane. And what had actually happened is we had a fuel leak, but nobody had spotted it because we just triggered this fight or flight response. We just said, we've got an engine failure. I know what to do, being the good student. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to be amazing. And actually, because we didn't dig deep, we didn't look at the root cause of the problem, ultimately we made it worse. And that's probably the most sobering lesson I've ever had, because the thought of that happening in real life is awful, really. But it teaches you that lesson, dig deep, find what the problem is, and fix the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Being in a flying situation with no engines working. Tremendous, tremendous.
Certainly makes you sweat.
Yes, yes. Yeah. How did you, what were some of the things that were going on in your mind when the second one went off as well?
Just start to think, what have I done? Like, what has happened? You pilots are trained to go into this decision making process, and it does become second nature. But you just have this frantic thing of what is happening, because you think you've dealt with the situation. You think that you've solved the problem about 20 minutes ago, and now something else has happened. Yeah, you do start to doubt yourself a little bit, and then it's just a case of collect as much information as you can, kind of as quickly as you can, to try and figure out exactly what's happened. But it's pretty terrifying, even in a simulator.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Jill says fight or flight is the killer in flying.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
it really, really is. They tell us to sit on your hands. That's like the number one thing we get told in the cockpit. Sit on your hands, let that thing pass, and then take it forward.
Mm. So give yourself space, give yourself time to think things through.
Absolutely, yeah. Let
Mm.
that immediate adrenaline surge that you get leave your body, and it's something that I talk about with the blue light responders that I work with the NHS, so the paramedics and the ambulance drivers, that they can be on standby, and they can be, pull over at the side of a road. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning, and they sit there to eat something and have a drink, and all of a sudden they get the call, and their adrenaline just spikes. It just goes from 0 to 100 immediately, and you just have to, for a second, just stop and just let that moment pass. We've all been in that situation where you get shaky hands, or your knees go a bit shaky, because something's about to happen. Your body knows it's about to happen. But it's taking, again, it comes back to that mindfulness thing of taking positive control, of saying, something we do in the cockpit, actually, with two pilots flying. If one person is going to do something, you announce, I have control.
Yeah.
And it's something I've tried with some of my clients, to just in that moment say to yourself, I have control, and just take positive control of the situation.
Yeah. It's true that we have all been in situations where we had sweaty hands and that hormonal rush through us. But I'm not sure if many of us have been in situations where we were responsible for lives of other people, Paul, like you have been.
Do you know, it's, it's,
So
it's an interesting one, that, because I think now more than ever, we kind of are in that situation. Business owners have the lives of their employees, or their clients, or their colleagues. If they make the wrong decision with their business, especially with things around redundancies, you do have people's lives in your hands. One wrong move could be the difference between your business surviving, your business collapsing. So I guess there is an element of life or death there as well, I think.
I just see that as our employment or our health or one aspect of our human life being on stake. But what you were responsible for were the actual lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I do get that. I remember being told quite early on in my career to imagine that your family is on every single flight that you fly, and it really kind of tunnels you into thinking about the people behind. Because we do so much work in a simulator. I spent those first 6 months in a simulator learning to fly the commercial jet and going through all the emergency procedures. It was actually really bizarre. The very first time I flew the aeroplane, and I flew from Bristol to Frankfurt, and I just opened the door and saw the passengers. I was like, oh, this isn't, I'm not used to this. What are you doing here? It's like the weirdest thing of, oh, yeah, there's people. That's what I'm meant to be doing.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
expect to see the flight school when you open the door, and then when you realize you are actually in Germany, it's funny. It's a really bizarre situation to be in, but that proves how real the simulator is as well. That you are so immersed in that situation that it just is. It just feels so real.
Yeah. Yeah. There was something that you said earlier on that really resonated with me, and that was about how we business owners respond to other people on social media, because so many of us really respond quickly. We wouldn't take a moment to think what we are saying or doing, or somebody would say something and we would just be swept in their drama, and we don't really need to do that.
No, absolutely, and I think it's such an interesting thing with social media, because there's almost an element as well of, if I don't get in there now, the moment's gone. Especially with a live. If people don't respond to this video while we're here, we might pick it up, we might not pick it up later on. You never quite know. So there is kind of that sense of urgency about it. But I think, again, for me, it comes down to that mindful, present attitude of, for me now, if I tune into a live, I will tune into that live. Because it's really easy to be listening into a live and sending a text message or checking emails or responding to something else, rather than being present. And then you get into that situation of, I've been using Clubhouse for the last couple of weeks, and it's a really interesting platform, and obviously the voice side of it. But the one thing you find more often than not is people keep saying, oh, I don't know if someone else has already asked this question, and then they ask a question, and you think, if you were present in this moment, if you were really engaging with this room properly, you would know whether that question's been asked. And obviously that's just my opinion. It's not always that easy to do. But I think we always have this sense of urgency about us, don't we? That everything we do must be done now. You can't do things in 10 minutes. You just have to do it now. And actually, if you take 10 minutes to stop, you come back and find that email is still sat there. Nothing's happened.
Yeah. I wonder if there is a certain fear of missing out, FOMO attached to, I've got to get this done right away. And if I don't tune into a live, or if people don't respond to my live video, it's just going to get lost.
Yeah, potentially. I think that there is an element of that. But for me, I think that always comes down to our perception of that situation. I've done live videos before, and people have messaged me on LinkedIn or Facebook afterwards, and I always take the time to respond to people. So I think that kind of fear of losing it, maybe it's bad experience, maybe people have felt like they wanted to contribute before. I don't think it helps at the moment that we feel so disconnected as well, that when you get the opportunity to talk to somebody and connect, we're so desperate to do it. We're so desperate for human interaction. The second we can have it, it's like, let's talk to everybody straight away. But it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of thing plays out over the coming months, I guess.
Yes, Clubhouse it's the new rage. I haven't checked it out. I am an iPhone user, so potentially I can get in there, but I haven't checked it out yet. But I hear lots of good things about it.
It's really good. Yeah, I think I'm being very open about it. I think as a coach and with my kind of goals of helping people, I think I need to be open to new things. When people ask me about it, I say, imagine it a podcast, but you can talk back. So if you find the right room and the right people, the right vibe, and people who are doing the right thing, the value is there. The value is there to be had. And the emphasis of it is to listen more than you speak as well, which I think is really good. But like I said before, it's really easy to just have it on in the background, forget it's there, and hear snippets. Just like anything else, really.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I hear you on that. Although it'll be very interesting to see how it pans out, because at the moment, a lot of people seem to be loving it. And there are people who say it's a great platform and it's bringing people together. And I would be very curious to see whether it's the platform that's bringing people together, or whether it is the people who are choosing to come together, because I truly believe that it's not a platform that can divide us or bring us together. I mean, platforms are just platforms, they're just vehicles. It is our own decision. I mean, we can choose to respond or react in a situation. Facebook doesn't do that for us.
No, absolutely. And I think the kind of, I think where people are engaging with Clubhouse more is because it's voice only. There's no commenting. So unless you physically speak on the platform, there is no kind of commenting or interacting. You have to actually engage verbally with what's being said, and nothing's recorded. So you have to be live. You have to be, as much in the moment as they can control it. But yeah, when something happens, it happens. It does mean if you're into a particular thing, it's quite easy to find it. So if your like target audience, for example, is America, in the UK, going on after lunch and into the evening, you're more likely to find those people and where they hang out.
Yeah.
I think the other thing with it at the moment is because it is kind of exclusive, because it's via invite only.
Yeah.
The people who are on there are the people who want to be on there,
Mm-hmm.
rather than it just being a mindless thing. But I have a good feeling about it, and I'm hoping it will work well for a vehicle for people to be able to express themselves.
Yeah, yeah. And I can see how much of mindfulness is weaved into this new thing, Clubhouse. And I know this is not a discussion about Clubhouse, but I'm just trying to tie the pieces, the threads that you have talked about, especially with respect to mindfulness. If we are focusing only on listening or just the audio, that gets us more engaged than having a attention in so many other places.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I've just set up a new group through there, and it's 5 wellbeing practitioners that I work with through my course, just having a conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
we get together twice a week and we just talk. But we allow people to come in and share their stories and talk to us, and that's something you would never get on any other platform. The fact that we can just bring someone in and say, tell us your story, and you hear some amazing, harrowing stories. Obviously I know you're big into the story thing, but I think there's so much power in listening to what somebody's saying, completely uncensored, unrestricted. If you're replying to a Facebook video and you're typing the text in there, you always proofread it, maybe delete a bit, maybe change a bit because it doesn't quite work the way you want it to work. Whereas I think a platform like that, where it's voice related, just like having a conversation over Zoom, you are there, you are in that moment, you are unedited, it's you, it's your personality. And I think it's going to be great for people who have a story to tell,
Mm-hmm.
who maybe haven't had the platform up until now to do it.
Well, I think I should be there too then.
Absolutely. Come and join
Sold. Right. Coming back to the cockpit method, Paul,
Yeah.
tell us some of the things that we can straight away apply from what you teach. Can you give us, let's say, top 3 tips that we can start applying to enhance our well-being mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I tell my NHS clients to do is on a post-it note or a piece of paper, just write down, fit your own oxygen mask, and just stick it in your office, in your bathroom, in your kitchen, anywhere. And just remind yourself of this constant idea that you need to take the steps for yourself. For me, that's always the first thing, because once you're self-aware, once you're aware of the situation, that's going to massively help you going forward. The second one would be to take 7 minutes every day to do something, whatever that would be. And I would say usually reading, stillness, learning something like mindful learning, mindful listening. And the hardest one that I try and do with my children is mindful talking. So actually giving myself 7 minutes to talk, but to be present in what I'm saying. So actually engaging and contributing, giving value to what I'm saying. And then the final one that I would say is get fresh air always. Especially this time of year, our body just wants daylight. It wants as much daylight as it can. And as we're finding ourselves working on computer screens and using our phones and using devices, it's tricking our body into thinking there's daylight there. And you need to kind of re-trigger your brain to realize that there's daylight. The airlines that I worked for always made sure that your duty either started or ended when there was daylight, for exactly that reason, that you just need to give yourself the triggers that make you realize that there's a real world out there.
Yeah, yeah. As a pilot, it must have been pretty hard if you were flying to a location that was in a completely different time zone.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite lucky because I predominantly flew in Europe. But if you were doing transatlantic flying, there are methods obviously for dealing with jet lag and things like that. But I know from colleagues of mine, they would always have a day off in the middle, and the point of that day off is to rest, recuperate, reset. The demands are a lot less if you are doing those things that kind of have a massive impact on your body.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes back to what you have been saying all along: oxygen mask on yourself first, whatever that means.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be big, grand gestures. I tried at the end of last year to do the miracle morning, and with 2 small children, it just didn't work. It was just impossible to be up as early as I needed to be up to fit everything in. So it's just about doing what's right for you, small steps, and build them up. If 7 minutes work for you, then do 14 minutes and then build it on and build on and build on.
Yeah.
If you can take 4 chunks of 7 minutes in your day, it'll be incredible.
Yeah, yeah. So we are talking about oxygen mask on ourselves for 7 minutes and getting some fresh air.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, easy peasy, we should all be able to do that.
Yeah, you would think. I think as long as you get them, as soon as you get the mindset, putting yourself first, everything else follows. But if you don't truly engage with the mindset that you are important and that you need to look after yourself, I think I said right at the very beginning, we think of it as a selfish act that we need to put ourselves first. But actually, I always say the saying is fit your own oxygen mask before helping others.
Yeah.
But I always say if you think of it as fit your own oxygen mask and then help others, that it's just a process that you take 7 minutes so that you have the rest of your day to help everybody. And that's exactly how it works in aviation. The cabin crew would do exactly the same. They would put an oxygen mask on, and then they would go through the entire cabin and help everybody else to make sure everybody else is safe. And you can imagine they can't do that if they don't have an oxygen mask on.
Yeah. The opposite isn't going to work at all.
No, and it's one of the things I quite like, because there isn't any middle ground with it. It is as simple as you either do it or you don't do it. If you do it, you'll be fine. If you don't do it, you'll burn out.
Yeah. When you put it like that, it is so simple to understand. If you do it, you're going to be fine. If you don't, you're just going to burn out.
Absolutely. But I had a day last week where my wife was sending me text messages whilst I was working in the office saying oxygen mask, because I'd had a really long, busy day and I wasn't looking after myself. We all need to have that reminder constantly to take those steps. It's human nature, isn't it, to serve and not take.
Well, I say it's a bit of story there as well. It's part of our conditioning. And it's just a story that we believe in, and most of us have picked it up from the world around us. From it's part of a social and cultural fabric, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And I think depending where you are in the world as well depends kind of how severe that is. Because I was coaching someone recently who was based in Asia, business based in Asia, and saying to them take 7 minutes off, they were like, what? I'm working. I am working. That's it. There is no that's the line in the sand. I am at work, so I am working.
Yeah.
There is, you can't get through that barrier, which is kind of what then led me on to saying to people, it doesn't have to be during your working day. It's you just schedule that time in your day when it's right for you, but just make sure you do it, whether you get up 7 minutes early and have that time. So I think it varies around the world as to how responsive people naturally are for it.
Yeah. And I always like to say that the thing with stories is that we practice our stories for so long that we forget that they are stories, and we start believing that they are the ultimate truth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like Chinese whispers, isn't it?
Yeah.
I heard someone say something on a podcast the other day, actually, that I was listening to about, every time you tell a story, all you are remembering is the last time you told the story. You're not remembering when it actually happened. So
Yeah.
once you've told your story once, you are no longer remembering what happened, and it's becoming this this series of Chinese whispers every single time you take it. It is making me think now, what did I change today in my story that wasn't there last time I told it?
Well, I think that keeps it all fresh, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it keeps it exciting. I love telling my story, and I love kind of inspiring other people to take similar sorts of actions. So yeah, if I can keep it exciting in my own head, then I think it's going to be exciting for the people.
Yeah, I did check out your story that the BBC had done last year. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it was great. It was really nice to be able to share it on that platform.
Yeah.
And because it went out on the BBC World Service, it had, massive reach across the world. Although it did crash my website when people find me, but there are worse problems to have.
Well, that's a good problem to have, isn't it? Too many people trying to reach you.
It is, absolutely, yeah. That was at the point I thought, yeah, 1 million people. I'll reach 1 million people next year.
And you wouldn't have any idea how many lives you would have touched by that one story.
No, absolutely not. No, I don't know how I would even try and measure something like that. Obviously, I can see the number of conversions that came to my website, but no, I quite like that. I think, when I worked in theatre, people used to say to me that if you read the good reviews and you love the good reviews and you're happy to talk and shout about them, then you also need to read the bad reviews. If you are, if you're going to celebrate the wins, you have to celebrate the losses as well. And I think it's quite true for business owners that we pride ourselves on these metrics, on them, being better. So I just don't look at any of them anymore. There's certain things I measure because I want to reach my 1 million people. But I think, if you start to look at things like that, like the reach of the BBC, then you also start to worry about the smaller audiences. And for me, if I turn up and one person's listening to me, then that's done the job I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, I was only suggesting that you might have already hit that 1 million mark. That's what I meant.
Yeah, possibly.
And there is no way that you would ever know that.
No, there's something quite nice about that.
Yeah.
There's people far reaching.
Yeah. So tell us, Paul, is there something exciting that's going on in the world of your coaching, the Cockpit Method, or is there something exciting coming up for you?
Yeah, so I've just launched a brand new program, a 12-week coaching program, and it's really exciting because for me it's going to be a community. So it's about obviously helping our clients, but also being able to help the well-being community. I think it's quite easy as business owners to feel like you're always in competition with each other and you want to fight to be the best. And I had an intention with this quite early on to bring people together, to just have this like support network. So the way I've structured my course is that we do 4 weeks of coaching. So we guide you through the process of just figuring out what well-being is and how well-being is going to work for you. And then over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, every day you will meet somebody new from the wellbeing industry. So I've got 20 people at the moment, and we're kind of expanding further and further. So you just have this amazing community of people that can help you with lots of things that you maybe would have never considered doing before. So for me, it's growing that community now is kind of one of the things that's on my list. It really excites me because I think being able to really bring people together is quite an exciting thing to do. And then ultimately we want to take that into the NHS to help as many people there as we can as well.
It sounds very fascinating, very fascinating. It feels like a completely different approach to coaching and well-being.
Yeah, and it's because for me, it's the whole, what I've created is based on a thing that I call the well-being contract. So it's a document that you write to yourself that says, this is what I'm going to do to support myself going forward. And I think for a lot of people, they don't actually know what they need. And it felt a bit like when I originally sort of put the concept together for this course, we were going to coach them to give them the knowledge behind well-being, but then not actually give them any strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to think through the strategies, I thought, actually, who am I to talk about strategies? I can talk about what worked for me, but that's not going to necessarily work for everybody. So I thought, you know what, let's just give them a space to try stuff, to figure things out. And I've worked with some incredible people. We've had some amazing videos. There was a session I did last week about using Lego to change your mindset. And I've actually still got my little Lego model that I made in that session. So it's just things like that you would have never thought about doing. Meditation, yoga. People have been telling me for years that I needed to do yoga because sitting in a chair all day flying was not very good for my back. But being quite a stubborn man, I was like, no, I'm not going to do yoga. Yoga's not right for me. I'm a stubborn man. And actually doing it through this course, through my own course, now I think it's amazing. And I would have never found that if it wasn't for being put in that situation where I had to try it. So for me, it was all about just removing me as a businessman from that scenario and ultimately just serving people. What do people need? What can I give them? How much value can I give them? And how can I get it all in one place and support them long term?
Yeah. I think that's the only order in which it works. We first have to connect with people and give them value, and then the business follows naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the go-giver mentality. I think it's rooted in that, isn't it? That give first and receive second, which is the opposite of the oxygen mask mentality.
That's interesting to hear. Yes.
I hadn't thought about it until that moment.
But then going back to the oxygen mask, if you do it the other way, it's just not going to work.
No, it will never work in that situation. You have to, I think well-being is one of the few times when you have to put yourself first. It has to be led from inside for it to work, but that would never work as a business owner.
Yeah, true. Before we let you go, Paul, tell us, how can people get in touch with you?
So you can find me either through my website, thecockpitmethod.com, or I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. Through LinkedIn, it's probably easier to search for the Cockpit Method and find me that way because there's millions of Paul Greens on LinkedIn. But I can put a link under this video actually. Then you can.
Yeah. If you could drop all your links, your profiles, social media profiles, and as well as links to your course or anything that you want us to know about, or your website, that'll be great.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll do that straight afterwards.
Brilliant. Paul, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I loved our conversation.
No, thank you for having me. It's been really nice to talk to you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody. Oh, here's a question. Who's the program for? Because that wasn't said. Paul, this is a question for you.
Yeah, so ultimately it's for anybody, suffering with well-being, but predominantly business owners. The emphasis right now is on business owners.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Derek. Thank you to everybody who has joined us live. And Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you.